My fingertips went numb as I gripped the hospital bed rail, staring at the X-rays illuminated on the screen. But the words multiple fractures remained in sharp focus through my tears. I forced myself to look at my sister Diane, who was scrolling through her phone, completely uninterested in what the doctor was saying about my condition. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. 12 separate fractures, the doctor said, his voice gentle but firm as he pointed to the bright white lines crossing through various bones on the screen. Some are fresh, but others show signs of healing, which means they've been there for weeks, possibly months. He turned to look directly at my sister, who finally glanced up from her phone with a look of annoyed inconvenience. Miss Taylor, given the extent of these injuries, I'm surprised your sister has been able to function at all. The pain must be excruciating. Diane's perfectly glossed lips parted slightly, the first crack in her composed facade. For 8 months, she'd been my legal guardian after our parents died in a car accident. For 8 months, she'd dismissed every wince, every cry, every plea for medical attention as nothing more than attention-seeking behavior. She's always been dramatic. Diane would tell her friends over wine nights at our house, loud enough for me to hear from my bedroom where I laid curled in pain. Ever since we were kids, everything was always about Madison. I'm Madison Taylor. I'm 17 and I've been fighting 2 battles. One against a mysterious condition that kept breaking my bones, and one against my sister's deliberate indifference. This is the story of how I made her finally see the truth she tried so desperately to ignore. The signs started small. A persistent ache in my wrist after falling during track practice. A shooting pain in my ankle when climbing stairs. Growing pains, Diane had said dismissively, tossing me a bottle of ibuprofen without looking up from her laptop. I had them too at your age. But I knew something was wrong. The pain wasn't normal, and it was getting worse. Diane had always resented being forced into the role of guardian. At 28, she had a thriving career as a marketing executive, a busy social life, and absolutely no desire to raise her teenage sister. She made that abundantly clear from the day I moved into her sleek downtown apartment. "This is temporary," she'd told me, showing me to the spare room that would become mine. "Just until you graduate next year. Then you're on your own." What Diane didn't say, but what I understood completely, was that my presence was an unwelcome reminder of the parents we'd lost. I looked too much like our mother. Same hazel eyes, same dark curls. Every time Diane looked at me, I could see the flash of grief quickly buried beneath annoyance. It was easier for her to be irritated with me than to face her pain. As my condition worsened, so did Diane's patience. When I dropped a glass because my fingers suddenly couldn't grip properly, she lectured me about carelessness. When I asked to see a doctor after finding an unusual bulge on my collarbone, she rolled her eyes. "WebMD has turned you into a hypochondriac," she snapped. "That's just how collarbones look." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. By the time 6 months had passed, I could barely make it through a school day without excruciating pain. My grades were slipping. My friends had stopped inviting me to things because I always canceled at the last minute. My track coach had reluctantly cut me from the team after I collapsed during practice, unable to finish a simple warm-up lap. "You're giving up everything you worked for because of phantom pains," Diane had said when I told her about being cut from the team. Mom and Dad would be so disappointed. That was the sharpest knife she could twist, invoking our parents, potential disappointment. She knew exactly how to make me question myself, to make me wonder if maybe I was just being dramatic after all. But Ms. Reeves, my English teacher, noticed what my sister refused to see. "Madison, you're pale as a ghost," she said one day after class, when I had taken twice as long as everyone else to pack up my books because my fingers wouldn't cooperate. "And you've been limping for weeks. Is everything okay at home?" The simple question broke something open inside me. After 8 months of being dismissed and gaslighted, someone was finally seeing me. "I think something's really wrong," I whispered, tears welling up. "But my sister won't take me to a doctor." Ms. Reeves' eyes had narrowed with concern. "Does Diane know she's your legal guardian? That means she's legally responsible for your medical care." She knows, I said quietly. She just thinks I'm making it up for attention. That afternoon, Ms. Reeves called Diane at work. I wasn't privy to the conversation, but Diane came home seething. "Congratulations," she spat, throwing her keys onto the counter with enough force to make me flinch. "You've managed to make me look like an abusive guardian. Your teacher threatened to call CPS if I don't take you to a doctor." I stood in the kitchen, my weight shifted entirely to my right leg because my left ankle could no longer bear any pressure. "I didn't ask her to call you," I said, my voice small. "She just noticed I was in pain." "Everyone's in pain, Madison," Diane shouted, her carefully controlled facade cracking. "That's what life is. Mom and Dad are gone, and it hurts every single day, but you don't see me falling apart and begging for attention?" The words hit like physical blows. I stumbled back, tears streaming down my face. "This isn't about Mom and Dad," I choked out. "This is about the fact that something is physically wrong with me, and you refuse to help." For a moment, Diane just stared at me, her eyes cold. Then she grabbed her purse. "Fine, get in the car, we'll go to urgent care and let them tell you it's all in your head. Maybe then you'll drop this act." The urgent care doctor had taken one look at me, at the way I held my arm protectively against my chest, at my awkward gait, at the visible swelling in my joints, and immediately ordered x-rays. "I'm concerned about the pattern of pain you're describing," he'd said, ignoring Diane's scoffs. "Multiple sites, increasing severity, visible swelling. This isn't typical for a healthy teenager." That was how we ended up in the hospital, with a grim-faced radiologist showing us x-rays that revealed the truth Diane had refused to see. 12 fractures. Some fresh, some partially healed, scattered throughout my body. My collarbone, 3 ribs, both wrists, my left ankle, my right shin, my pelvis, my right shoulder blade, and 2 vertebrae. "How is this possible?" Diane whispered, her voice hollow with shock. "She hasn't been in any accidents." "That's what we need to figure out," the doctor said. "These fractures are consistent with a condition that affects bone density or structure. We'll need to run more tests, but given the extent of the damage, I'm admitting Madison immediately." As they prepared a room for me, Diane sat beside my gurney in the emergency department, her face ashen. For the first time since our parents died, she really looked at me, not through me or past me, but at me. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" she asked. I stared at her in disbelief. "I tried. For 8 months I tried. You didn't want to hear it." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "I thought," she began, then stopped. I didn't think it could actually be serious. "Why not?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me for months. Why was it so impossible to believe that I was really hurt? Diane looked down at her hands. "Because if you were really hurt, then I was failing you, and I've already failed enough people." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken grief. Our parents. Deaths had broken something in Diane that she had refused to acknowledge. It was easier to believe I was seeking attention than to accept that she might lose someone else she was responsible for. The next few days passed in a blur of tests and specialists, blood draws, bone scans, genetic testing. I was diagnosed with a rare form of juvenile osteoporosis, exacerbated by a vitamin D deficiency so severe that the endocrinologist was shocked I was still conscious. "Her bones essentially have the density of someone 4 times her age," he explained to Diane, who had barely left my hospital room since my admission. "The slightest trauma, even just the pressure of walking, can cause fractures." "Is it?" Diane's voice caught. "Is it treatable?" "Yes," the doctor assured us. "With medication, supplements, physical therapy, and proper nutrition, we can halt the progression and potentially reverse some of the damage. But," he added, his expression grave, "recovery will be slow, and some of these fractures may cause chronic issues if they've healed improperly." That night, after the doctors had gone and the hospital had quieted, Diane sat beside my bed, scrolling through her phone. But instead of ignoring me, as she usually did, she was researching my condition, making notes about treatments and specialists. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, looking up from her phone. "I should have listened to you. I should have helped you months ago. I wanted to stay angry. I had every right to be furious with her for the months of pain, for the dismissal, for making me doubt my own body. But the sight of my sister, always so composed, so certain, so untouchable, with tears streaming down her face, broke through my anger. "Why didn't you believe me?" I asked quietly. Diane set her phone down and really looked at me. "After Mom and Dad died, I couldn't handle one more bad thing. It was easier to believe you were being dramatic than to face the possibility that something was seriously wrong with you too. I convinced myself you were just struggling with grief, looking for attention." "I was struggling with grief," I said, "and I was also in physical pain. Those things can exist at the same time." Diane nodded slowly. "I know that now." She reached out tentatively and took my hand, careful to avoid the IV. "I'm gonna make this right, Madison, I promise. Whatever you need, whatever the doctors recommend, we'll do it. No more dismissing your pain. No more pretending everything's fine when it's not." I believed her, but I also knew that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. I documented everything. I told her, in case you tried to deny it later. Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I have a journal," I explained. "Dates, symptoms, times I asked for help and what you said. I recorded some of our conversations on my phone. My friend Zoe has copies of everything." Diane looked stricken, but she didn't argue. "You shouldn't have needed to do that," she said finally. "But I understand why you did." In that moment, something shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. Diane had seen the truth she'd been avoiding, and she couldn't unsee it. The hospital stay stretched from days into weeks as the doctors worked to stabilize my condition. School assignments piled up. My friends visited when they could. And Diane. Diane surprised me. She took a leave of absence from work to be with me full-time. She researched my condition obsessively, joined online support groups for families dealing with juvenile osteoporosis, and interviewed specialists across the country. "We have an appointment with Dr. Mehra next month," she told me one afternoon as I struggled through a physical therapy session. "She's pioneering a new treatment protocol at Mayo Clinic. Insurance won't cover it, but I'm going to figure something out." "How?" I asked, wincing as the therapist guided me through gentle stretches that felt like fire in my damaged bones. "Your savings?" Diane nodded. "And I'm selling the condo. We need a single-level place anyway. No more stairs for you." I stared at her in shock. Diane loved that condo. It was her pride and joy, the symbol of everything she'd accomplished on her own. "You don't have to do that," I said. "Yes, I do," she replied simply. "I'm your guardian. I should have been taking care of you all along." Recovery was slow and painful. There were setbacks. A new fracture when I tried to return to school too soon, complications from one of the medications, nights spent in the emergency room when the pain became unbearable. But through it all, Diane was there, advocating for me in ways I never thought possible. She fought with insurance companies, researched experimental treatments, and once, memorably, reduced a dismissive doctor to stammering apologies when he suggested my continued pain might be, quote, psychological. "My sister has 12 documented fractures," she'd said, her voice like ice. "There is nothing psychological about broken bones. If you can't take her condition seriously, we'll find a doctor who will." Watching her transform from the person who had dismissed my pain to my fiercest advocate was disorienting. The sister who had once rolled her eyes at my dramatic complaints now kept meticulous records of my symptoms, medications, and test results. 6 months after my diagnosis, we moved into a small ranch house on the outskirts of town. It had wide doorways that could accommodate a wheelchair on my bad days, no stairs, and a backyard where I could sit in the sun to help my body absorb the vitamin D it so desperately needed. "It's not as fancy as the condo," Diane said as she helped me settle onto the porch swing she'd installed specifically because I mentioned once that I'd always wanted one. "But I think it could be a real home." Home. The word carried weight. Since our parents died, nothing had felt like home. Diane's condo had been a place to stay, not a place to belong. But this house, with its accessibility modifications and personal touches, felt like the first step toward something new. As my body slowly began to heal, so did our relationship. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old resentments flared, when I questioned her motives, when she slipped back into dismissive habits. But we were trying, both of us, to build something from the wreckage of our shattered family. One evening, as we sat on the porch swing watching the sunset, Diane turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I found something today," she said, pulling a small notebook from her pocket. When I was unpacking the last of the boxes from the storage unit, she handed it to me, and I recognized it immediately. Our mother's handwriting on the cover. "Mom's recipe book?" Diane nodded. "I thought maybe we could try making her lasagna tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it." It was such a small thing, but it brought tears to my eyes. Our mother's lasagna had been a Sunday tradition, a meal we'd taken for granted until suddenly there were no more Sunday dinners, no more family traditions. "I'd like that," I managed to say. As we sat there in comfortable silence, I realized something important. My sister hadn't just learned to believe my pain. She'd learned to face her own. For so long, she'd been running from grief, hiding behind work and irritation and denial. Now she was finally standing still, letting herself feel the loss of our parents, the fear of almost losing me too. "Madison," she said suddenly, her voice quiet but steady, "I want you to know that I'm getting help. I started seeing a therapist. About Mom and Dad, about how I treated you, about everything." I turned to look at her, surprised. Diane had always scoffed at therapy, calling it paying someone to tell you what you already know. "It's helping," she continued. "It doesn't fix anything, but it helps me understand why I did what I did. Why I couldn't let myself believe you were really sick." I reached over and took her hand, careful of my still healing wrist. "I'm glad," I said simply. The road ahead would be long. My bones would need months, possibly years, to heal completely. Some damage would be permanent, but for the first time since the accident that took our parents, I felt a fragile hope. Not just for my physical recovery, but for healing the broken relationship with my sister. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across our new front yard, I leaned my head against Diane's shoulder. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed, tentatively putting her arm around me. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, and I wasn't sure if she was trying to convince me or herself. "Not the same as before, but okay." I nodded against her shoulder. "Different doesn't have to mean worse," I said, repeating something our mother used to tell us when we faced disappointments. Diane's breath caught, and I felt a tear drop onto my hair. "No," she agreed softly. "Different can sometimes be better, if we build it right." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I thought about the journey that had brought us here, the pain, both physical and emotional, the struggle to be believed, the long path toward healing that still stretched before us. It wasn't the life either of us had imagined, but it was ours, and for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't facing it alone. My sister had finally seen the truth of my broken bones, but more importantly, she had begun to see me, not as a burden or an inconvenience or a reminder of what we'd lost, but as family, as someone worth fighting for. And I was starting to see her too, not as the enemy who had dismissed my pain, but as someone who had been broken in her own way, trying desperately to hold herself together the only way she knew how. Sometimes the most painful breaks aren't the ones that show up on X-rays. Sometimes they're the fractures in our relationships, in our trust, in our ability to see each other clearly. But even those breaks can heal, with time, with care, and with the courage to face difficult truths. As night fell completely, wrapping our little house in darkness, I made a silent promise to myself and to my sister. We would heal, all our broken parts, seen and unseen. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be perfect, but we would do it together. One fragile bone, one difficult conversation, one shared memory at a time. The day my sister finally saw my X-rays, something fundamental shifted between us. The 12 broken bones scattered throughout my body told a story she could no longer deny. In the sterile hospital room, as the doctor pointed to each fracture on the illuminated screen, I watched Diane's face transform. The dismissive mask she'd worn for 8 months cracked open, revealing the fear and guilt she'd been hiding beneath her indifference. "We'll need to admit Madison immediately," the doctor said, his voice firm. "These fractures indicate a serious underlying condition. Some of them are weeks old." She must have been in excruciating pain. Diane's eyes met mine across the room, wide with horror. I could read the questions there. How had she missed this? How had she dismissed me for so long? What kind of guardian, what kind of sister, had she become? 2 weeks into my hospital stay, the diagnosis came back: a rare form of juvenile osteoporosis combined with a severe vitamin D deficiency. "It's an unusual presentation, especially in someone so young," Dr. Mercer explained to us. "But the good news is we can treat it. The medications, supplements, and physical therapy should strengthen your bones over time." "How long will it take?" Diane asked, her notebook open on her lap. Since my diagnosis, she'd become obsessive about documenting everything the doctors said, researching treatments late into the night on her laptop while I slept in my hospital bed. Dr. Mercer's expression grew serious. "Recovery will be measured in months, not weeks. Some of these fractures, particularly those that began healing incorrectly, may need surgical intervention. And Madison will need to be extremely careful to prevent new fractures while her bone density improves." That night, after the doctors had left and the hospital had grown quiet except for the steady beeping of monitors, Diane sat beside my bed, still making notes in her journal. The dark circles under her eyes testified to her exhaustion. "You should go home and get some sleep," I told her. "You look terrible." She glanced up, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Gee, thanks." "I'm serious," I said. "You've barely left this room in 2 weeks." Diane set her pen down and looked at me directly. "I'm not leaving you alone again," she said simply. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me, a large part, was still angry. For 8 months, I'd begged her to believe me, to help me. For 8 months, she'd dismissed my pain as attention-seeking and dramatics. "Why now?" I asked finally. "What's different?" Diane's gaze dropped to her hands. "Now I can't deny it anymore. The evidence is right there on those X-rays. I can't tell myself you're exaggerating or making it up or just trying to make my life difficult." "I never wanted to make your life difficult," I said quietly. "I just wanted you to help me." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I know that now. I think I knew it then too, but—" She trailed off, struggling to find the words. "After Mom and Dad died, taking care of you felt like this enormous responsibility I never asked for. I was angry at them for leaving, at the situation, at you for needing me when I could barely keep myself together. It was easier to believe you were fine than to face one more thing that was broken." I let her words sink in, recognizing the truth in them. Since the accident that took our parents, Diane and I had been like 2 planets knocked out of orbit, circling each other warily, unable to find a stable connection. She'd retreated into work and denial. I'd been left alone with my grief and, increasingly, my physical pain. "I thought you hated me," I admitted, "that you resented having to take me in." Diane looked stricken. "I didn't hate you. I was just terrified of failing you, of losing you too." She reached out hesitantly and took my hand, careful to avoid the ivy line. "I'm so sorry, Madison. I should have listened to you. I should have helped you the first time you told me something was wrong." It wasn't enough to erase 8 months of dismissal and neglect, but it was a start. A crack in the wall that had grown between us since our parents' funeral. The next morning, Ms. Reeves visited, bringing a stack of assignments from my teachers and a small potted plant for my windowsill. "The English department sends their best," she said, setting the cheerful yellow flowers where I could see them from my bed. "Everyone's pulling for you." I introduced her to Diane, watching as my sister stiffened slightly. Ms. Reeves was the one who had forced Diane to take me to a doctor by threatening to call Child Protective Services. There was an awkward moment as the two women sized each other up. "Thank you," Diane said finally, her voice tight but sincere, "for advocating for Madison when I wasn't." Ms. Reeves nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Your sister is one of the brightest students I've ever taught. She deserves every chance to thrive." After she left, Diane turned to me with a rueful smile. "She still thinks I'm the worst guardian ever, doesn't she?" "Probably," I agreed, "but you're getting better." The road to recovery stretched before me like an impossible mountain. Physical therapy was excruciating. Each movement carefully designed to strengthen my muscles without putting pressure on my healing bones. The pain medications made me nauseated and dizzy. The bone density treatments left me fatigued and achy. But through it all, Diane was there. She took an extended leave from work, using all her vacation time and then switching to part-time remote status. She learned to administer my injections, mastered the complex schedule of medications, and transformed our apartment to minimize fall risks. "We should consider moving," she said one evening, about a month after my diagnosis, as she helped me navigate the 3 steps up to our apartment, a journey that now took 10 minutes of careful maneuvering. "This place isn't accessible enough for your recovery." I leaned heavily on my crutches, sweat beading on my forehead from the effort of climbing those 3 simple steps. "We can't afford to move," I pointed out. Diane's leave of absence had already strained our finances, and the medical bills were mounting despite insurance. "We'll figure something out," she said firmly. "Your health comes first." It was such a stark reversal from the sister who, just months before, had refused to even take me to a doctor, that I found myself momentarily speechless. The next day, Diane brought home a stack of real estate listings and spread them across my bed. "These are all single-level homes with no steps to enter," she explained. "I've already talked to a realtor about putting the condo on the market." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're selling your condo? You love this place." She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It's just walls and floors. What matters is that you can recover properly." That was the moment I truly began to believe that Diane's transformation wasn't just guilt-driven or temporary. She was choosing me, my health, my future, over the life she'd built for herself before our parents' accident. It was a profound shift, and it stirred something in me that I had thought was long dead: hope. 2 months after my diagnosis, I was finally cleared to return to school part-time. My bones were still healing, and I would need to use a wheelchair for longer distances, but the doctors agreed that social interaction would be good for my mental health. My return was both better and worse than I'd imagined. My close friends Zoe and Tyler had visited me in the hospital and kept in touch through texts and video calls. They were waiting for me at the school entrance on my first day back, holding a hand-painted banner that read, "Welcome back, Madison," in glittering letters. But the wider school community's reaction was more difficult to navigate. People stared at the wheelchair, at my casts and braces. They whispered behind their hands. Some avoided me entirely, as if my condition might be contagious. Others asked invasive questions about my diagnosis, my treatment, whether I would ever be normal again. By lunchtime, I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I sat with Zoe and Tyler in the cafeteria, picking at my carefully packed lunch, high in calcium and vitamin D, prepared by Diane that morning. "Is it weird being back?" Zoe asked, sliding half her cookie onto my tray. I nodded, too tired to elaborate. The medications made it hard to focus, and the constant navigation of social interactions on top of physical pain was overwhelming. "Madison!" a voice called across the cafeteria. I looked up to see Ethan Parker, captain of the track team and my former running partner, making his way toward our table. My stomach dropped. Ethan and I had been close before my condition deteriorated, training together for meets, celebrating each other's victories. But he'd been one of the first to drift away when I could no longer keep up, when my mysterious pain kept me from practices. "I heard what happened," he said, sliding into the empty seat beside me. "Coach told us about your diagnosis. We all feel terrible about how we treated you last year." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. The track team had been my second family before my symptoms started. When I began struggling, unable to maintain my times or sometimes even finish practices. They'd grown increasingly impatient. Eventually, Coach had suggested I, quote, take some time off, a polite way of cutting me from the team. You couldn't have known, I said finally, though part of me thought they should have. I'd told them I was in pain. I'd explained that something felt wrong. They, like Diane, had chosen to believe I was being dramatic or making excuses. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. We're having a team dinner Friday night at Coach's house. You should come. Everyone wants to see you. The invitation was well-intentioned, but the thought of sitting through a dinner with the team that had discarded me was exhausting. Thanks, but I have physical therapy on Fridays, I said, which was true but also a convenient excuse. After Ethan left, Tyler raised an eyebrow. You could have gone if you wanted to. Your PT is in the morning. I shrugged, wincing as the movement sent pain through my still-healing collarbone. I'm not ready to forgive them yet, I admitted. Is that petty? Zoe shook her head fiercely. It's not petty. They didn't believe you when you needed them to. Just like your sister didn't. The comparison made me uncomfortable, though I couldn't quite articulate why. Diane is trying now, I said defensively. She's doing everything she can to help me. After she was forced to, Zoe pointed out. After a doctor showed her proof she couldn't ignore anymore. Her words stung because they contained truth. Diane hadn't believed me until she had no choice, until the evidence was literally illuminated on an X-ray screen. But since then, she had thrown herself into my care with a dedication that surprised even me. That evening, as Diane helped me with my exercises, I found myself watching her more closely than usual. She was thinner than she had been before my diagnosis, the stress and long hours at the hospital taking their toll. Her once immaculate appearance had given way to practical ponytails and comfortable clothes suited for caregiving. What? She asked, catching me staring. Nothing, I said quickly. Just, thank you, for everything you're doing. Diane looked surprised, then pleased. You don't have to thank me. It's what I should have been doing all along. 3 months after my diagnosis, we moved into a small, single-level house on the edge of town. It had wide doorways for my wheelchair, a roll-in shower, and a gently sloping ramp to the front door. The house wasn't fancy, nowhere near as sleek and modern as Diane's beloved condo, but it was functional for my needs. What do you think? Diane asked anxiously as she wheeled me through the front door for the first time. The living room gets great natural light, which is good for your vitamin D absorption when it's too cold to sit outside. I looked around at the cozy space. Diane had already moved some of our furniture in, arranging it to create clear pathways for my mobility aids. On the wall hung a large framed photograph of our family, Mom, Dad, Diane, and me, taken the summer before the accident. It was the first time she'd displayed any family photos since our parents died. It's perfect, I said, meaning it. It feels like a home. Diane smiled, relief evident in her expression. I was hoping you'd say that. Now, let me show you your room. I had them install support bars beside the bed and in the bathroom. And there's an emergency call button if you need help when I'm not here. As she gave me the tour, pointing out all the modifications she'd made to ensure my safety and comfort, I realized something important. Diane wasn't just going through the motions out of guilt or obligation. She genuinely wanted me to heal, to thrive. She was rebuilding her entire life around my needs, not resentfully but willingly. That night, as we ate dinner at our new kitchen table, lowered to accommodate my wheelchair, Diane brought up something unexpected. I've been thinking about your education, she said, passing me the salad bowl. Even part-time, school seems to be exhausting you. Dr. Mercer mentioned that stress can actually impede bone healing. I tensed, afraid she was going to suggest pulling me out of school entirely. Despite the challenges, school was my connection to normalcy, to a future beyond my current limitations. There's a private academy across town, Diane continued. Westridge. They have experience with students who have medical conditions. Smaller classes, flexible schedules, accommodations for physical limitations. I've arranged for us to tour it next week if you're interested. I stared at her, stunned. Westridge Academy was one of the most prestigious schools in the state. Its graduates went on to Ivy League universities and successful careers. It was also prohibitively expensive. "We can't afford Westridge," I said carefully. Diane met my gaze steadily. "I've been doing some financial planning. If I sell my car and take that marketing consulting job I was offered, we can make it work. They also have scholarships for students with medical needs, and your academic record is stellar." "You'd sell your car?" I asked incredulously. Diane's sleek sports car was her pride and joy, a symbol of her success. She shrugged. "It's just a car. Your education matters more." In that moment, I glimpsed the depth of my sister's commitment to making amends, to becoming the guardian, the family I needed. It wasn't just about meeting my basic needs anymore. It was about ensuring I had opportunities, a future, the best possible chance at a full life despite my condition. The realization was overwhelming. For months, I'd held onto my anger at Diane's earlier dismissal, keeping a careful emotional distance even as I accepted her physical care. Now, faced with this tangible evidence of her transformation, I felt that barrier beginning to crumble. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I don't want you to give up everything for me. Your car, your condo, your career. It's too much." Diane reached across the table and took my hand. "Madison, listen to me. Before Mom and Dad died, I was focused on all the wrong things: status, appearances, career advancement. I thought success meant a fancy address and an expensive car. I was wrong." She squeezed my hand gently. "What matters is family. You're my family. Nothing else even comes close in importance." I blinked back tears, recognizing the echo of our mother in Diane's words. Mom had always prioritized family over material success, a value Diane had seemed to reject after leaving for college. Now, in the wake of tragedy and near disaster, she was finding her way back to those core values. "We'll look at Westridge," I agreed, "but only if there's a scholarship. I won't let you bankrupt yourself for my education." Diane smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Deal. But I'm still selling the car. I've already found a practical 4-door with excellent safety ratings and plenty of room for your wheelchair in the trunk." As we settled into our new home and new routines, I found myself watching Diane with increasing curiosity. The sister who had once been too busy with work to attend my track meets now scheduled her entire life around my medical appointments. The woman who had prioritized her career above all else now worked from home, taking calls in between helping me with exercises and preparing nutrient-rich meals. It wasn't just her actions that had changed, but something fundamental in her character. The hardness that had encased her since our parents' deaths was softening, revealing glimpses of the sister I'd known before, the one who had taught me to ride a bike, who had helped me with science projects, who had once been my fiercest defender. 4 months after my diagnosis, Dr. Mercer delivered cautiously optimistic news. "Your bone density is improving," he told us during our monthly checkup. "The medications are working, and your nutrition plan is clearly helping. The latest fractures are healing cleanly." Diane beamed, clutching her ever-present notebook. "What about the older fractures? The ones that started healing before diagnosis?" Dr. Mercer's expression grew more serious. "Those are more complicated. The right collarbone and left ankle, in particular, have healed at angles that may cause long-term issues. We should consider surgical intervention to reset them properly." The word surgery sent a chill through me. I'd endured so much already. The pain, the medications, the physical therapy, the limitations on my once active life. The thought of deliberately breaking and resetting bones that had finally, painfully healed was terrifying. "Is it necessary?" I asked, my voice small. "Not immediately life-threatening, no," Dr. Mercer said carefully. "But long-term, these improperly healed fractures could cause chronic pain, restricted movement, and potentially contribute to arthritis as you age. You're young, Madison. We want to give you the best possible foundation for a healthy future." On the drive home, I was quiet, processing this new development. Diane gave me space, understanding my need to think. "You don't have to decide right away," she said finally, as we pulled into our driveway. "We can get second opinions, research alternatives." I nodded, grateful for her support but still overwhelmed. "It just feels like every time I start to make progress, there's a new setback." Diane parked the car and turned to face me. "It's not a setback," she said firmly. It's part of the journey forward. These surgeries, if you choose to have them, aren't moving you backward. They're investments in your future mobility and comfort. Her perspective helped, reframing the situation in a way that made it seem less daunting. It was one of many moments in recent months when Diane had surprised me with her insight, her empathy, her ability to see beyond immediate challenges to the bigger picture. That night, unable to sleep, I wheeled myself into the living room and found Diane already there, working on her laptop with a cup of tea beside her. "Can't sleep?" she asked, setting her computer aside. I shook my head. Too much on my mind. "Want to talk about it?" I hesitated, then decided to ask the question that had been growing in my mind for weeks. "Why are you doing all this? And don't say because you're my guardian or because you feel guilty. I want the real reason." Diane looked surprised, then thoughtful. She took a sip of her tea, considering her answer. "Do you remember that summer at Lake Tahoe? You were about 7, I was 18, getting ready to leave for college. Mom and Dad took us hiking, and you fell into that ravine." I nodded, remembering the incident vaguely. A family vacation, a steep trail, a moment of carelessness that had sent me tumbling down a rocky slope. "I was the one who climbed down to get you," Diane continued. "You'd twisted your ankle, were covered in scratches, crying your eyes out. I carried you all the way back up that slope and then 2 miles to the ranger station. You kept saying, 'I knew you'd come for me, Di. I knew you wouldn't leave me there.'" Her eyes grew distant with the memory. "That trust, the complete certainty in your voice that I would help you, that I would never leave you in pain, it was the most important I'd ever felt. Like being trusted with something precious." She looked at me directly. "When you got sick, when your bones started breaking, you asked me for help the same way you did that day on the mountain. And I failed you. I broke that trust." I swallowed hard, remembering how many times I'd begged Diane to believe me, to help me, in those long months before my diagnosis. "Everything I'm doing now," she continued, "isn't just about guilt or obligation. It's about earning back that trust. About becoming the sister you deserved all along, the one who never leaves you in pain, who always comes when you call. I want to be that person again, the one you believed in without question." Her honesty stunned me. For the first time, I truly understood the depth of her regret, but also the genuine love driving her actions. This wasn't just about making amends or fulfilling responsibilities. It was about reclaiming our relationship, rebuilding the bond that had been damaged, not just by her dismissal of my symptoms, but by the shared grief we'd never properly addressed. "I do trust you," I said quietly. "Not the way I did before. I don't think either of us can go back to that kind of blind faith. But I trust that you're trying, that you want what's best for me. That counts for something." Diane smiled, though her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "It's a start," she said, "and I'll take it." As we sat together in the quiet of our new home, I realized we were both healing, not just my broken bones, but our broken relationship. Like my improperly healed fractures, the damage between us couldn't be erased, but with care and commitment, it could be reset, could heal stronger at the broken places. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be surgeries and setbacks, difficult conversations and painful memories. But for the first time since our parents died, since my bones began to break, I wasn't facing that path alone. My sister, my family, was beside me, holding steady through the pain, helping me find my way back to solid ground. 6 months after my diagnosis, I sat in Dr. Mercer's office reviewing my latest scans. The atmosphere was different now, less crisis management and more strategic planning. Diane sat beside me, her familiar notebook open on her lap, color-coded tabs marking different sections: medications, physical therapy exercises, nutritional guidelines, surgical options. "Your bone density has improved significantly," Dr. Mercer said, pointing to the comparative scans on his computer screen. "The medication protocol is working well, and your vitamin D levels are finally within normal range." He smiled, the expression warming his usually serious face. "You've been doing the hard work, Madison, and it shows." I glanced at Diane, who was rapidly taking notes while still managing to look proudly in my direction. The hard work had been grueling. Daily medications that made me nauseous, painful physical therapy sessions, a strict dietary regimen, and the constant vigilance required to prevent new fractures. But I hadn't done it alone. Every step of the way, Diane had been there, transforming herself from reluctant guardian to unwavering advocate. "What about the surgical options we discussed?" Diane asked, flipping to a tab in her notebook labeled Surgical Interventions. "For the collarbone and ankle that healed improperly?" Quote, Dr. Mercer nodded, turning to another set of images. "I've consulted with Dr. Sharma, our orthopedic specialist. Given Madison's improved bone density, we believe she's now strong enough to undergo corrective surgery. The procedures would be staged, ankle first, then collarbone after full recovery. The prospect of surgery still frightened me, but not as much as it once had. Over the past months, I'd learned that pain could be temporary, that healing was possible, that I was stronger than I'd ever imagined. What's the recovery timeline?" I asked, thinking about school, about the tentative plans Diane and I had been making for the future. "For the ankle, you're looking at 6 to 8 weeks of restricted mobility, followed by intensive physical therapy," Dr. Mercer explained. "The collarbone would be similar, though with different functional limitations. Ideally, we'd schedule the first surgery for early summer, so you'd have maximum recovery time before the next school year." On the drive home, Diane and I discussed the options, weighing immediate discomfort against long-term benefits. It was a conversation that would have been unimaginable a year ago, not just because my condition was still undiagnosed then, but because Diane and I hadn't been capable of such thoughtful communication. "It's your body," Diane said as we pulled into our driveway. "Your decision. But I think Dr. Mercer's right. Correcting these improperly healed fractures now will prevent a lifetime of chronic pain and limitations." I nodded, appreciating her respect for my autonomy while still offering guidance. "I want to do it," I decided. "Both surgeries. I want to give myself the best chance at a normal life." Diane smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "There's nothing normal about you, Madison Taylor. You're extraordinary." The compliment brought unexpected tears to my eyes. For so long, I'd just wanted to be believed, to have my pain acknowledged. Now my sister saw beyond my broken bones to the strength that had carried me through unimaginable challenges. As spring bloomed around our little house, I found myself spending more time in the backyard garden Diane had created for me, a peaceful space with a comfortable outdoor chair positioned to catch maximum sunlight, raised beds within easy reach from my wheelchair, and wind chimes that danced in the gentle breeze. It was in this garden that I began keeping a new journal, different from the one that had documented my symptoms and Diane's dismissals. This journal was forward-looking, filled with plans, hopes, reflections on how far I'd come. It became a way of processing not just my physical healing, but the emotional journey as well. One afternoon, as I sat writing in my journal, Zoe visited, bringing homework assignments and gossip from school. I'd switched to a hybrid learning model, part in-person, part remote, that allowed me to manage my energy while staying connected to my education. "So," Zoe said, settling into the second garden chair, "have you thought more about Westridge? The application deadline is next month." I closed my journal, marking my place with a pressed flower. "I'm still not sure. The scholarship would cover tuition, but it's so far from everything I know." Westridge Academy had offered me a full academic scholarship after reviewing my transcripts and medical records. It was an incredible opportunity. Small classes, individualized attention, state-of-the-art facilities designed with accessibility in mind, and a track record of sending graduates to top universities. But it was across town, meaning I'd have to leave my current school, my established support network, the familiar routines I'd worked so hard to rebuild. "Change is scary," Zoe acknowledged. "But sometimes it's necessary for growth. Look at everything that's changed already. Your health, your relationship with Diane, this house. None of that would have happened if you'd stayed in your comfort zone." Her words resonated with something Dr. Sullivan, my therapist, had said during our last session. After my diagnosis, Diane had insisted I see a mental health professional to process not just the trauma of my prolonged, undiagnosed illness, but also the complex grief of losing our parents and the breach of trust with my sister. Healing isn't just about repairing what's broken, Dr. Sullivan had told me. It's about creating something new from the experience, something that might be different but can still be beautiful and functional and meaningful. That evening, I broached the subject with Diane as we prepared dinner together, a new routine we'd established, with me handling seated prep work at our adjusted-height kitchen island while she managed the stove and oven. "I think I want to apply to Westridge," I said, carefully slicing bell peppers for our stir-fry. "If the scholarship comes through." Diane looked up from the wok, surprise and pleasure mingling in her expression. "Really? That's wonderful, Madison. Your application is already strong, but we can work on the essays together if you'd like." "You seem happier about this than I expected," I observed. "It would mean a lot of changes for both of us." She set down her spatula and turned to face me fully. "Change doesn't scare me anymore," she said simply. "Not after everything we've been through. What matters is what's best for you, for your future." I studied my sister's face, noticing the subtle differences time had etched there. The sharp edges of her corporate ambition had softened into something more grounded, more authentic. The defensive barriers she'd erected after our parents' deaths had given way to an open vulnerability that made her both stronger and more approachable. "Besides," she added with a small smile, "I've already researched the commute. It's doable, especially once we've saved enough for a better car." Her casual mention of future plans, of a shared trajectory that extended beyond my immediate medical needs, warmed something deep inside me. We were no longer just surviving the crisis. We were building a life together, step by careful step. The day of my first surgery arrived with a mixture of apprehension and determination. Diane had prepared meticulously, arranging for time off work, stocking the freezer with nutritious meals, setting up a recovery space in the living room where I could be comfortable without navigating to my bedroom. As the nurses prepared me for the procedure, Diane held my hand, her presence steady and reassuring. "I'll be right here when you wake up," she promised. "Everything's going to be fine." I believed her, not with the blind faith of childhood, but with the earned trust that had grown between us over months of healing, both my bones and our relationship. The surgery was successful, but grueling. I woke to pain that even the prescribed medications couldn't fully mask, to the disorienting fog of anesthesia, to the frustration of even greater mobility limitations than before. The first week of recovery tested everything I'd learned about patience and perseverance. Diane never faltered. She administered medications on schedule, helped with the humiliating basics of personal care when I couldn't manage alone, and sat with me through tearful nights when the pain and restricted movement became overwhelming. "I hate this," I confessed during a particularly difficult moment 3 days post-surgery. "I hate being dependent, being broken, being a burden." "You are not a burden," Diane said fiercely, adjusting my pillows with gentle hands that belied her intense tone. "You are my sister. You are fighting harder than anyone I've ever known. And you are winning, Madison, even when it doesn't feel like it." Her unwavering belief in me became a lifeline during the darkest moments of recovery. When physical therapy exercises left me trembling with exhaustion, when the slow pace of healing tested my resolve, when milestones I'd once taken for granted, standing unassisted, walking to the bathroom, climbing a single step, seemed impossibly distant, Diane's faith in my resilience never wavered. 2 months after my ankle surgery, I stood without support for the first time, balancing carefully on my healing leg, while my physical therapist and Diane watched with bated breath. 30 seconds, the therapist counted, her expression professional but pleased. "That's excellent progress, Madison." The triumph of that moment, small by ordinary standards but monumental in my journey, brought tears to Diane's eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered as she helped me back into my wheelchair afterward. "You have no idea how proud I am." I did know, though. I saw it in every action, every sacrifice, every adjustment she'd made to support my healing. The sister who had once dismissed my pain now celebrated each incremental victory as if it were an Olympic gold medal. As summer progressed and my recovery from the first surgery continued, we received unexpected news. My application to Westridge Academy had been accepted with a full scholarship, including additional stipends for medical transportation and adaptive equipment. They were particularly impressed by your personal essay, the admissions director told us during a video call. Your perspective on resilience and the importance of being believed. It was quite moving. After the call ended, Diane handed me an envelope. "This came while you were napping," she said. "I think it's from Ms. Reeves." Inside was a card congratulating me on the Westridge acceptance, along with a small silver pin shaped like a phoenix. "To remind you that you rose from the ashes," Ms. Reeves had written. "Your strength inspires everyone around you." I ran my fingers over the phoenix pin, thinking about how apt the symbolism was. From the devastation of our parents, death, from months of undiagnosed pain and dismissal, from broken bones and broken trust, something new had emerged. Not perfect, still healing, but alive with possibility. The night before my second surgery, Diane and I sat in our backyard garden, watching fireflies dance in the growing darkness. The evening was peaceful, the air sweet, with the scent of blooming jasmine that Diane had planted because she'd read it had calming properties. "I found something today," Diane said after a comfortable silence. "When I was preparing your room for post-surgery." She handed me a worn journal, my old one, the record of my symptoms and her dismissals that I'd kept during those dark months before diagnosis. "You kept this?" she asked softly. "All this time?" I nodded, taking the journal but not opening it. At first it was evidence, in case I needed to prove what was happening. Then it became a way to validate myself when no one else would. After diagnosis, I just couldn't let it go. It felt important somehow. Diane nodded slowly. "May I read it?" "Not all at once, but I want to understand better. What it was like for you. What I put you through." The request surprised me. We'd talked about those months, in therapy sessions, in late-night conversations, in moments of conflict and reconciliation. But there was something different about the raw, real-time documentation in that journal. The desperate entries written in moments of excruciating pain, the cataloged dismissals, the growing fear and isolation. "It's not easy reading," I warned. "I wasn't gentle in how I wrote about you." "I don't deserve gentle," Diane said simply. "I deserve honest." I handed her the journal, an act of trust that felt both frightening and liberating. "We're not those people anymore," I told her. "Either of us." She accepted the journal, holding it carefully, respectfully. "No, we're not. But we were shaped by them. I think understanding where we've been helps us choose where we're going." The conversation shifted to lighter topics, plans for my recovery, ideas for making my room at Westridge feel like home, a virtual tour of the campus we'd scheduled for next week. But the weight of the journal between us felt significant, a shared acknowledgement of our painful past and our commitment to a different future. The second surgery was more difficult than the first. The collarbone correction requiring more extensive intervention than the doctors had initially anticipated. I woke to news that they'd needed to insert a small plate and screws to properly align the bone, extending my projected recovery time. "It was necessary," Dr. Sharma explained during rounds the day after surgery. "The improper healing was more extensive than the scans showed. But the procedure was successful, and with proper physical therapy, you should regain full range of motion." This recovery tested us in new ways. The pain was different, more insistent, the limitations affecting my upper body instead of my mobility. Simple tasks, brushing my hair, feeding myself, reaching for a glass of water, became monumental challenges. Diane adapted, as she always did, finding creative solutions to each new obstacle. She researched adaptive equipment, consulted with occupational therapists, and transformed our home once again to accommodate my temporary needs. 3 weeks into recovery, during a particularly difficult physical therapy session, I reached my breaking point. The exercises designed to prevent frozen shoulder were excruciating, and progress seemed painfully slow. "I can't do this anymore," I sobbed, my arm throbbing despite the pre-session pain medication. It's too hard. It hurts too much. The physical therapist stepped back, giving me space. Diane knelt beside my chair, her expression serious but compassionate. "You can do this," she said quietly. "You've already done harder things. You survived months of pain without proper diagnosis. You endured when no one believed you. You kept fighting when it would have been easier to give up." She took my hand, the one not immobilized by surgical recovery. "But you don't have to do it alone. Not anymore. When it gets too hard, lean on me. That's what I'm here for." Something in her words penetrated the fog of pain and frustration. I took a deep breath, then another. "Help me," I said finally. "Show me how to do this." Together with the therapist, Diane guided me through the remaining exercises, supporting my arm, counting repetitions, celebrating each small victory. It wasn't easier exactly, but it was more manageable with her steady presence beside me. That night, as she helped me prepare for bed, I noticed Diane's eyes were red-rimmed. "Are you okay?" I asked, concerned. She nodded, arranging pillows to support my healing collarbone. "I've been reading your journal," she admitted. "A few pages each night." "Oh, I wasn't sure what else to say." Those pages contained my raw, unfiltered experience: pain, fear, anger, betrayal. "I knew I'd failed you," Diane continued, sitting on the edge of my bed. "But reading your words, understanding how alone you felt, how scared. I never want you to feel that way again, Madison. Never." I reached for her hand with my good arm. "I don't. That's the point. Everything's different now." She smiled through her tears. "Yes, it is. And I promise you it will stay different. Whatever challenges come next, we face them together." By the end of summer, as I prepared for my first day at Westridge Academy, both surgeries were behind me. My recovery wasn't complete. There would be months more of physical therapy, ongoing medication, regular bone density scans, but I had reached a new normal. I could walk short distances without assistance, manage most daily activities independently, and look toward the future with genuine hope. The night before school started, Diane surprised me with a small party. Just Zoe, Tyler, and Ms. Reeves gathered in our backyard garden, which had flourished into a riot of late summer blooms. "A celebration," Diane explained, presenting me with a small wrapped package. "For everything you've accomplished." Inside the box was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a bone, stylized into an artistic design rather than a medical illustration. I looked up at her, questioning. "To remind you of your strength," she said. "How you rebuilt yourself. Literally bone by bone. How you never gave up, even when everything was broken." Ms. Reeves raised her glass of sparkling cider. "To Madison," she toasted, "whose courage taught us all what resilience truly means." Zoe and Tyler joined the toast, adding their own affirmations. "To new beginnings at Westridge," Zoe added. "You're going to be amazing there." Later, after our guests had gone and Diane and I were clearing the last of the party decorations, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. From broken bones to broken trust, from dismissal to diagnosis, from reluctant guardianship to genuine family, we had traversed territory neither of us had been prepared for. "Do you ever wonder," I asked Diane as she folded the garden chairs, "what Mom and Dad would think about how we ended up?" She paused, considering the question with the thoughtfulness that had become characteristic of her. "I think they'd be proud," she said finally, "not of how I treated you initially. They would have been devastated by that, but of how we found our way back to each other. Of the family we've built from the wreckage." Family. The word held new meaning now, defined not by obligation or blood relation alone, but by the choice to show up, to believe, to support, to grow together through life's hardest moments. The next morning, as I prepared for my first day at Westridge, Diane insisted on commemorating the moment with a photo. For the new family album, she explained, positioning me in front of our house, my new school uniform crisp, my posture straight and strong despite the still healing bones beneath. "Ready?" she asked, both of us knowing the question encompassed far more than just the school day ahead. I nodded, thinking of all we'd overcome, all we'd learned, all we'd built together. Ready. In that moment, standing on the threshold of a new chapter, I realized that my broken bones had revealed something essential, not just about my physical condition or my sister's capacity for growth, but about the nature of healing itself. True healing isn't about erasing damage or pretending pain never happened. It's about acknowledging brokenness and building something new in its place, something that honors both the fractures and the mending. My body would always bear the evidence of those 12 broken bones, surgical scars, slight asymmetries, the occasional twinge during weather changes. My relationship with Diane would always carry the memory of her dismissal, of months spent unheard and unbelieved. But these markers of past pain no longer defined us. They were simply part of our story, chapters in a longer narrative of resilience and redemption. As I climbed into Diane's practical, safety-rated sedan, so different from the sleek sports car she'd once prized, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, a girl transformed not just by physical trauma and recovery, but by the profound experience of falling apart and being rebuilt, of losing faith and finding it again in unexpected places. "Hey," Diane said, noticing my contemplative mood. "Remember what Dr. Sullivan always says?" I smiled, recalling the therapist's favorite phrase. "Healing isn't linear." Diane nodded, starting the car. "Some days are harder than others. Some moments we take steps backward. But the direction matters more than the pace." As we drove toward Westridge, toward my new beginning, I thought about direction. How drastically ours had changed since those early days of pain and dismissal. How what had begun as a medical crisis had evolved into a profound journey of reconnection and growth. My 12 broken bones had forced both of us to confront painful truths about ourselves, about each other, about what family really means. Through the fracturing had come rebuilding, stronger at the broken places, more authentic in our imperfections. "We're going to be okay," I said suddenly, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Diane glanced at me, her smile reaching her eyes in the way I'd come to treasure. "Yes," she agreed simply, "we are." And in that moment, I believed her completely, not because she was always right or because she'd never fail me again, but because we had learned painfully and profoundly how to be broken and whole at the same time, how to fall and rise together, how to build something beautiful from the shattered pieces of what came before. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.